My name is Evelyn Hart, and I'm 59 years old. I spent 30 years as a pediatrician before retiring, bringing hundreds of babies into the world, comforting countless frightened mothers. I never imagined that when my own daughter gave birth, I'd be standing outside her hospital room, blocked from meeting my grandchild. I'd driven 2 hours the moment Marissa's husband Derek texted that she was in labor. I bought flowers from the hospital gift shop, pink and white roses, Marissa's favorites when she was little. My hands trembled with excitement as I approached the maternity ward. A nurse stood at the door, checking visitor names against a list. "Are you the patient's mother?" she asked professionally. I smiled, tears already forming. "Yes, I'm Evelyn Hart. I'm here to meet my grandchild." Before the nurse could respond, Marissa's voice cut through the air from inside the room. Loud, cold, and sharp as glass. "Don't let her in. She's nobody." The words hit me like a physical blow. The nurse's face filled with embarrassment. Other visitors in the hallway turned to stare. The roses slipped from my hands, petals scattering across the hospital floor. Nobody. My daughter had just called me nobody. I stood frozen in that hallway, unable to move or speak. The nurse looked between me and the door, clearly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding. I'm sorry, ma'am," she said quietly. "I have to respect the patient's wishes." Through the doorway, I could see movement. Medical staff bustling around, the sound of a baby crying, my grandchild, crying their first cries. Derek appeared briefly in my line of sight, holding a small bundle wrapped in hospital blankets. He glanced toward the hallway, saw me standing there, and quickly looked away. No acknowledgement, no invitation, nothing. I waited there for 5 full minutes, hoping someone would change their mind, hoping Marissa would call me back, say she'd made a mistake. But the door stayed closed. The staff carefully avoided looking at me. And slowly, the reality sank in, I wasn't wanted here. I bent down shakily, picking up the scattered roses, and walked away. My footsteps echoed down the empty corridor as I left the maternity ward. Behind me, my daughter was beginning her journey as a mother. And she'd decided to begin it without me. I brought her into this world, I whispered to myself in the parking lot, tears streaming down my face. And now I'm not even allowed to meet the life she brought into it. Driving home, memories flooded my mind. Marissa's father, James, had died when she was only 5 years old. A heart attack, sudden and devastating, leaving me alone with a kindergartner and a mountain of grief. I'd worked 2 jobs for years after that, my regular pediatric practice during the day, and weekend shifts at an urgent care clinic. Every extra dollar went toward giving Marissa the life James and I had dreamed of for her. Private school with small classes and good teachers. Piano lessons she begged for at age 8. Summer camps where she learned horseback riding and French. Dance classes, art supplies, college prep courses, everything she wanted, I found a way to provide. I remembered packing her lunch every morning, even when I'd only slept 3 hours. Attending every school play, every recital, every parent-teacher conference, no matter how exhausted I was. When she got accepted to college, I cried with joy. All the sacrifice had been worth it. But I also remembered a moment during her teenage years that should have been a warning. She was 16, angry about something I can't even remember now. "When I make it big, I'm not going to be like you, Mom," she'd said. Stuck in scrubs forever, taking care of other people's kids. The words had stung then. They burned even worse now, in hindsight. I pulled into my driveway as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My house felt too quiet, too empty. I sat in my car for a long time before going inside. On my way home, I'd driven past the building where my financial advisor's office was located. The same office where, 3 years ago, I'd set up a trust fund for Marissa's future children. "It's never too early to start," Mr. Langford had advised. "Building generational wealth takes planning." I'd been depositing money regularly ever since, $500 every month, plus larger bonuses whenever I had extra. By now, the account held over $250,000. Money I'd saved from retirement funds, from selling James's old car, from carefully managing every expense. All for a grandchild I was building a future for. A grandchild I hadn't been allowed to meet. A grandchild whose mother had called me nobody. The irony was crushing. I'd sacrificed comfort, vacations, early retirement, all to build security for family. And that same family had just told hospital staff I was nobody to them. Inside my house, I made tea I didn't drink and sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, trying to understand how I'd ended up here. 2 years earlier, Marissa's wedding had been the first clear sign that something had changed in our relationship. It was held at an expensive country club, paid for mostly by Derek's family. They were wealthy, owed money from real estate and investments. The kind of wealthy where everyone knew their name. I'd arrived at the wedding venue excited, wearing my nicest dress, ready to celebrate my daughter's happiness. But when the seating chart was revealed, I was placed at a back table, far from the wedding party. Derek's extended family, cousins, business associates, people who barely knew Marissa, sat closer to the front than I did. During the reception, when Marissa introduced me to Derek's parents, she'd said awkwardly, "This is my mom, Evelyn. She's retired now." Not, "She's a pediatrician," or, "She dedicated her life to helping children." Just, retired. Like my career, my accomplishments, my entire identity could be reduced to that one word. I'd noticed how Marissa flinched whenever I spoke too loudly or laughed too freely. How she steered me away from important guests. How she seemed embarrassed by my stories about her childhood. Derek's mother had looked at me with polite but distant eyes, clearly unimpressed. And in that moment, I'd realized, my daughter was ashamed of me. Of my modest background, my small-town manners, my lack of social status. But I'd convinced myself it was wedding stress, that things would improve. I'd been wrong. Derek's influence on Marissa had been gradual but unmistakable. He was handsome, charming, successful, and completely obsessed with appearances and status. I'd noticed it from their first date, the way he talked about his car, his job, his connections. But Marissa had been dazzled by him. Who could blame her? After growing up with just me, seeing me struggle, she'd found someone who represented ease and luxury. But Derek had slowly isolated her from me. It started with small comments I'd overheard. "She's too old-fashioned, babe. You need space from that kind of energy. Your mom's great, but she doesn't really understand our lifestyle. Maybe we should limit visits. You know how she gets." At first, Marissa defended me. But over time, her defenses weakened. She started canceling our lunch dates. Phone calls became shorter, less frequent. Holidays were spent with Derek's family while I received obligatory visits that felt more like charity than love. I tried talking to her about it once, gently suggesting that Derek seemed to be coming between us. She'd gotten angry, accused me of being jealous, of not wanting her to be happy. I'd backed off, not wanting to push her away further. But I'd watched helplessly as my daughter transformed into someone I barely recognized. Someone who valued status over substance. Someone who could stand in a hospital room and call her own mother nobody. 3 weeks after the birth, I'd heard nothing from Marissa. No phone call, no text, no photos of the baby. I'd waited, hoping she'd reach out when she was ready, when the postpartum exhaustion settled and she remembered I existed. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I sent a simple text, "How are you and the baby doing? I'd love to hear from you." I stared at my phone for hours, watching for the 3 dots that would indicate she was typing. When the response finally came, 12 hours later, it was a single word, "Fine." That was it. Fine. Not an invitation to visit. Not a photo. Not even the baby's name. Just fine, like I was a distant acquaintance making polite conversation rather than her mother, desperate for connection with her only grandchild. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. Should I push harder? Should I apologize for whatever I'd done wrong? Should I beg to be included in their lives? In the end, I sent nothing. Because I'd realized something painful: silence can be louder than words. And this silence was screaming that I wasn't wanted. That night, I pulled out old photo albums. Pictures of me holding baby Marissa in the hospital, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. Pictures of her first steps, her first day of school, her high school graduation. Where had that little girl gone? The one who'd made me Mother's Day cards and called me her best friend? When had she decided I was nobody? A month after the birth, I received an automated email notification from my bank. The monthly automatic transfer I'd set up for the baby's trust fund had cleared. $500, just like clockwork, deposited into an account building a future for a child I'd been banned from meeting. I logged into my account and stared at the balance: $253,000. Years of careful saving, of sacrificing small pleasures, of choosing security over comfort. All for a grandchild whose mother had erased me from their life. My cursor hovered over the account details. This money represented more than just dollars. It represented every extra shift I'd worked, every vacation I'd skipped, every luxury I'd denied myself. It represented hope for the future, love for family, a legacy I wanted to leave behind. And it was building a future for a child who would probably never know I existed. Who would grow up hearing nothing about their grandmother, or worse, hearing that I'd abandoned them. The injustice of it burned through me. Not the hot, explosive anger of a moment, but the slow, steady burn of realization. I was giving everything to people who'd given me nothing but rejection. I closed my laptop without doing anything. But the seed had been planted. If I was nobody to them, then perhaps my money shouldn't mean something. 2 months after the birth, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. I rarely used social media anymore, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see pictures of my grandchild, even if it was through a screen rather than in person. That's when I saw it, a post from my distant cousin Linda, who'd somehow connected with Marissa online. A photo of 3 generations: Derek's elderly parents, Derek and Marissa, and the baby. The caption read, "3 generations, Red Heart, so blessed to have such a beautiful family." 3 generations. As if I didn't exist. As if an entire generation of this baby's family tree had been erased. The comments piled up beneath the photo. Such a beautiful family. That baby is precious. You're so lucky to have such wonderful grandparents involved. Each comment felt like a knife. I scrolled through Marissa's profile, photos I apparently wasn't blocked from seeing, just blocked from being included in. The baby's nursery. First bath. First outing. Derek's parents holding my grandchild with proud smiles. Everything I'd been denied, given freely to them. My hands shook as I closed the browser. Then I went to my account settings and deleted my Facebook profile entirely. If I was going to be erased from their story, I wouldn't torture myself by watching it unfold from the shadows. That night, I barely slept. The image of that photo haunted me. 3 generations. I'd given Marissa life, raised her alone, sacrificed everything for her future. And I'd been reduced to nothing. The next morning, I opened the drawer in my bedroom dresser where I'd been storing something special. A baby blanket I'd been knitting for months before Marissa gave birth. Soft yellow yarn with a delicate pattern of stars and moons. I'd imagined wrapping my grandchild in it, watching them sleep peacefully in something made with my own hands. The blanket sat there, still wrapped in tissue paper, never delivered. Beneath it were the trust fund documents, my name listed clearly as trustee and beneficiary designator. $253,000 for a child who didn't know I existed. I picked up both items, the blanket and the documents, and placed them side by side on my bed. One represented love and hope. The other represented financial security. And neither one mattered to the people I'd created them for. My voice came out stronger than I expected, surprising even myself. If I'm nobody, then my money shouldn't mean something. The words hung in the air of my quiet bedroom. For weeks, I'd been drowning in hurt and confusion. But suddenly, something shifted. Clarity cut through the fog of pain. I didn't have to accept this treatment. I didn't have to keep giving to people who only took. I had choices. And it was time to make one. I picked up my phone and called my estate lawyer, Mr. Langford. I need to make an adjustment to the trust fund, I said, my voice steady and calm. Mr. Langford's voice came through the phone, professional but curious. An adjustment? What kind of adjustment did you have in mind, Evelyn? I looked at the trust documents spread across my bed. Years of planning, of building something meant to last beyond my lifetime. I want to revoke it. Completely. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Revoke it? Evelyn, that's a substantial amount of money. Are you certain? Perhaps we should discuss. I'm certain, I interrupted gently but firmly. My circumstances have changed. The trust is no longer serving its intended purpose. Another pause. I see. Well, it's your money, of course. But I have to ask, have you thought this through? Once we begin the revocation process, there will be legal steps involved. It's not instant. I understand. How long will it take? About 2 weeks for the paperwork to process completely. But Evelyn, if I may speak as someone who's known you for years, is everything all right? I appreciated his concern, but I wasn't ready to explain. Everything is fine, Mr. Langford. I'm simply reassessing my priorities. Can we schedule a meeting to begin the process? Of course. How about tomorrow afternoon? Perfect. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness exactly, but something close to peace. Control. Agency. The power to decide how my life, my money, my love would be distributed. I wasn't being cruel. I was simply no longer allowing myself to be treated as nobody. And that felt like the first honest decision I'd made in years. Exactly 1 week after I signed the revocation papers in Mr. Langford's office, my phone rang. Marissa's name flashed on the screen. It was the first time she'd actually called me in over 3 months. My hand hesitated over the answer button. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to make her wait the way she'd made me wait. But curiosity won out. Hello? You canceled the trust? Marissa's voice exploded through the phone, high-pitched with fury. No greeting, no, how are you, just immediate accusation. Did you get a notification from the bank? I asked calmly, already knowing the answer. Mr. Langford had mentioned that secondary beneficiaries, in this case, Marissa, would be notified of major account changes. Yes, I got a notification. What the hell, Mom? That money was for my baby. I felt remarkably calm, almost detached. I thought I wasn't part of the family, Marissa. You made that very clear at the hospital. That's completely different. That money wasn't for me, it was for my child. The irony was almost amusing. So your child is entitled to my money, but I'm not entitled to meet them? Not entitled to be called their grandmother? Not entitled to basic respect? You're being ridiculous. You can't just, I can, actually. It's my money. I earned it. And I've decided to allocate it differently. I could hear her breathing heavily, trying to control her rage. Mom, please. You're being emotional. Let's talk about this rationally. I am being rational, Marissa. For the first time in months, I'm thinking clearly. You called me nobody. You banned me from the hospital. You've sent me exactly 1 word in 3 months. 1 word. Tell me, why should I fund a future for a family that doesn't include me? Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, desperately, because he's your grandson. Her words hung between us. My grandson. I had a grandson, and I didn't even know his name. What's his name? I asked, my voice cracking despite my attempt to stay strong. Another pause. Why does that matter right now? We're talking about his future, about his security, because you've never told me. In 3 months, you've never once mentioned his name. So tell me now, what's my grandson's name? I could hear Derek's voice in the background, muffled but urgent. Marissa covered the phone, and I caught fragments of their conversation. She's being impossible. Just tell her whatever. The mortgage guarantee. That last phrase made my blood run cold. Mortgage guarantee? Mr. Langford had mentioned that the trust fund was listed as collateral for something, but I'd been too hurt to pay attention to details. Marissa, I said slowly, what mortgage guarantee? The line went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. Derek's parents, they helped us buy the house. The trust fund was part of the security arrangement. If you cancel it, they'll recall the loan. So that was it. The trust fund wasn't just about providing for my grandson's future. It was collateral for Marissa and Derek's lifestyle. For the house they couldn't actually afford without family money backing them up. Let me make sure I understand, I said, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. You blocked me from meeting my grandson, called me nobody in front of hospital staff, and ignored me for months, but you're calling now because canceling my trust fund affects your mortgage? No answer. Marissa? It's not just about the mortgage, Mom. It's about stability for our family. Your family. Not mine. You made that distinction very clear. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not with sadness this time. With anger. Pure, justified anger. They'd wanted my money while erasing my presence. They'd wanted my financial support while denying me emotional connection. Well, they couldn't have both. 3 days later, someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Marissa standing on my porch, alone. No Derek, no baby. Just her, looking tired and anxious. I considered not answering. But curiosity, and perhaps a small, stubborn hope, made me open the door. Mom, she said, her voice tight. We need to talk. You're welcome to come in, I said, stepping aside. She walked into the living room, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. Maybe she was, she hadn't visited in over a year. Nice to see you finally visiting, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Mom, please. Can we skip the sarcasm? Why not? You skipped basic courtesy for months. Seems fair. She sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together. Look, I know you're hurt. I know the hospital thing was harsh. Harsh? I laughed bitterly. You called me nobody, Marissa. You banned your own mother from meeting her grandchild. That's not harsh. That's cruel. I was in labor. I was overwhelmed and emotional and what? Decided that was the perfect time to erase me from your life? She looked at her hands. Derek's parents were there. His whole family. It felt crowded and complicated, and I just wanted. Wanted what? A perfect picture without me ruining it? Her silence was answer enough. You can't do this to us, Mom, she said finally, her voice desperate. The mortgage, the house, we'll lose everything. I sat across from her, studying the daughter I'd raised. You already lost what mattered most, Marissa. You just haven't realized it yet. Don't be dramatic. This is about money, not emotions. That's exactly the problem. You think they're separate. We sat in tense silence. Finally, I spoke. Why should I give you my money, Marissa? Give me one good reason. She met my eyes, and what I saw there wasn't remorse. It was calculation. Because we're family. Those words, which should have meant everything, meant nothing coming from her. After Marissa left, angry, desperate, but still not apologetic, I sat alone in my living room for a long time. The house felt different somehow. Not emptier, but clearer. Like removing something toxic had let fresh air in. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello? Ms. Hart? This is Jennifer Morris. I was the nurse at the hospital when your daughter gave birth. I froze, memories of that humiliating day flooding back. I remember. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the hospital directory. I know I probably shouldn't have, but I've been thinking about that day for months. It's all right, I said cautiously. What can I do for you? Nothing. I wanted to do something for you, actually. I wanted to apologize. That surprised me. You didn't do anything wrong. You were following the patient's wishes. Maybe legally, but it felt wrong. The way your daughter treated you, the way her husband looked at you. I've been a maternity nurse for 15 years, and I've seen hundreds of families. Some are complicated, some are messy. But what happened that day was cruel. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you for saying that. You were so kind, Jennifer continued. You brought flowers. You were crying with joy. And she called you nobody. I've never forgotten it. I actually told my own mother about it because it bothered me so much. Someone remembered. Someone had witnessed my pain and acknowledged it was real. That means more than you know, I whispered. You're not nobody, Ms. Hart. That baby is lucky to have you as a grandmother, whether they know it yet or not. After we hung up, I cried. But this time, they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of validation. I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. What had happened was wrong. And someone else had seen it too. That conversation with Jennifer sparked something in me. A desire to reclaim my identity, my purpose. I'd spent months drowning in rejection, defining myself by Marissa's cruelty. It was time to define myself differently. I called the hospital where I'd worked for 30 years and asked about volunteer opportunities. They were thrilled to have me back. Within a week, I started volunteering in the maternity ward 2 afternoons a week. I held babies whose mothers were sleeping. I brought coffee to exhausted fathers. I sat with single mothers who had no family, listening to their fears and offering reassurance. One afternoon, I met a young woman named Sophie. 22, alone, scared. Her family had disowned her for getting pregnant. The baby's father had disappeared. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held her newborn daughter. I sat beside her hospital bed, remembering my own fear when James died and I became a single mother. You can, I said firmly. It's hard, but you're stronger than you think. And you're not alone, there are people who will help you. I spent the next hour connecting her with resources, housing assistance, childcare programs, support groups. I held her baby while she filled out paperwork, marveling at the tiny fingers and perfect features. Thank you, Sophie said as I left. You're an angel. I wasn't an angel. I was just a grandmother channeling love that had nowhere else to go. And slowly, week by week, I started healing. Not by forgetting what Marissa had done, but by remembering who I was beyond her rejection. 6 months after canceling the trust fund, news reached me through an unexpected source. My former colleague, Dr. Patricia Chen, called me one evening. Evelyn, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I heard something today that you might want to know about. What is it? Derek's business is failing. Badly. My husband does accounting for several companies in that sector, and apparently Derek's company is going under. They're facing bankruptcy. My first reaction surprised me, not satisfaction, but concern. Despite everything, Marissa was still my daughter. Are you sure? Very sure. They've already laid off most of their staff. Derek might lose everything. After we hung up, I sat with this information. Part of me felt the poetic justice of it. They'd relied on my money as security, rejected me personally, and now faced consequences. But another part of me, the mother part, worried about Marissa and my grandson. I didn't reach out. But I paid attention. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things. Marissa's social media posts became less frequent, less polished. The designer handbags and expensive restaurants disappeared from her photos. She started posting about simplifying and getting back to basics, code words for financial struggle. Derek's parents, who'd been so prominent in their lives, seemed to have pulled back. Apparently wealthy families don't like being associated with failure. The perfect image Marissa had tried so hard to maintain was crumbling. And I felt strangely detached from it all. Like watching a story unfold that I was no longer part of. 3 months later, my phone rang. Marissa again. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom? Her voice was different, smaller, scared, crying. I'm here. We're losing everything. The house, Derek's business, everything. His parents cut us off. We have nothing. She sobbed into the phone. Please. Please help us. I know I don't deserve it, but please. I closed my eyes, feeling the pull of old habits. The instinct to fix, to rescue, to sacrifice myself for my child. But I'd learned something in these months of healing. Enabling someone isn't the same as loving them. Marissa, I can't help you. Can't or won't? Both, I said quietly. You made choices. You chose status over family. You chose Derek's parents over me. You called me nobody and built your security on money from someone you didn't even respect. Now you're facing the consequences of those choices. That's not fair. I was stupid, okay? I made mistakes. But you're my mother, you're supposed to help me. I've been your mother your whole life. I worked myself to exhaustion giving you everything you wanted. And the moment you didn't need me anymore, you threw me away. I'm sorry. Is that what you want to hear? I'm sorry. Are you sorry, Marissa? Or are you just desperate? Silence on the other end. You already lost what mattered most, I said again. And it wasn't the house or the money. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. But underneath the pain, there was something solid. Boundaries. Self-respect. The refusal to be treated as nobody ever again. A week after that call, Mr. Langford contacted me for a routine review of my estate planning. I wanted to update you on the trust fund situation, he said. Since you revoked it, the funds have been sitting in a holding account. Have you decided what you'd like to do with them? I'd been thinking about this for months. Yes, actually. I want to create a scholarship foundation. What kind of scholarship? For single mothers pursuing careers in medicine. Women who are raising children alone and trying to build better futures for their families. I could hear the smile in his voice. That's beautiful, Evelyn. What would you like to call it? The Hart Foundation for Single Mothers in Medicine. The paperwork took several weeks to finalize. $253,000 that had been meant for a grandchild who didn't know I existed would now help dozens of women in situations similar to mine years ago. Women struggling to balance motherhood and education, sacrificing sleep and comfort to build something better. The foundation would award 5 scholarships annually, tuition assistance, childcare stipends, textbook funds. Everything I'd wished I'd had when Marissa was young. When the foundation officially launched, we held a small ceremony. Local news covered it. The headline read, "Retired Pediatrician Creates Scholarship for Single Mothers." In the article, they asked about my inspiration. I understand what it's like to raise a child alone while pursuing a medical career, I said. I know how hard it is to choose between being present for your child and building a future for both of you. If this foundation helps even one mother achieve her dreams, it will have been worth it. The article went viral in local circles. People praised the foundation. And somewhere, I knew, Marissa would see it. Would understand where her son's trust fund had gone. 2 weeks after the foundation launched, a letter arrived at my house. Hand-delivered, not mailed. The handwriting on the envelope was Marissa's. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The letter was 3 pages, single-spaced. An apology mixed with self-justification, explanations mixed with excuses. She was sorry for calling me nobody, but she'd been stressed. She was sorry for cutting me out, but Derek's family had been overwhelming. She was sorry for only reaching out when she needed money, but she'd been desperate. Every apology came with a but. Every admission of wrongdoing came with a reason why it wasn't really her fault. At the bottom, she'd written, "I know I hurt you, and I'm trying to be better. Please don't give up on us. Please don't give up on your grandson." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I wrote on the outside, "Some doors must stay closed until you learn to knock with respect." I mailed it back to her, unopened letter inside. It felt harsh. It felt necessary. Because real apologies don't come with excuses. Real remorse doesn't center itself. And I was done accepting half-hearted attempts at reconciliation just because I was tired of the pain. If Marissa wanted a relationship with me, she'd have to do more than write a letter full of buts. She'd have to actually change. And until then, the door would stay closed. 6 months later, the Hart Foundation held its first annual charity gala. It was a modest event at a local hotel, nothing fancy, but meaningful. We'd raised additional funds throughout the year and were ready to award our first 5 scholarships. The local newspaper sent a journalist to cover it. During the interview portion of the evening, she asked me about my family. "Do you have children, Dr. Hart?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I have a daughter, yes." "Is she here tonight? Does she support the foundation?" I could have lied. Could have made excuses. Instead, I said simply, "She taught me an important lesson about the difference between giving and being taken for granted. That lesson inspired this foundation more than she knows." The journalist's eyes widened slightly, sensing a story. But I didn't elaborate. The interview aired on the local news that evening. The clip included my comment about giving versus being taken for granted. Within hours, it had been shared on social media. People related to it, stories of one-sided relationships, family members who only appeared when they needed something. The comments section filled with support. "This woman is incredibly strong. More people need to learn this lesson. Good for her for setting boundaries." And somewhere in the city, I knew Marissa was watching. Seeing her mother honored and celebrated, hearing her own behavior described, though not by name, on television. I hoped it stung. I hoped it made her think. But mostly, I hoped it showed her that I'd built a life beyond her rejection. A life with purpose and meaning that had nothing to do with her approval. 9 months after the birth of my grandson, something unexpected happened. I was at the hospital for my regular volunteer shift when I saw them, Marissa, Derek, and a baby in a stroller, waiting in the pediatric clinic hallway. My heart stopped. For a moment, I considered turning around, leaving before they saw me. But my feet kept moving forward. We were on a collision course. Marissa looked up first. Our eyes met across the hallway. She looked different, thinner, more tired, less polished. The expensive clothes and perfect makeup were gone. She looked more like the daughter I'd raised than the stranger she'd become. Derek was on his phone, oblivious. The baby, my grandson, sat in his stroller, looking around with curious eyes. They were here for his 9-month checkup, probably. Standard pediatric visit. For a long moment, Marissa and I just stared at each other. No anger in her expression now, just exhaustion and something that might have been shame. I could have walked past them. Could have ignored them the way they'd ignored me. But I found myself stopping. "Hello, Marissa." My voice was neutral, professional. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was small, uncertain. Derek looked up from his phone, recognized me, and his face flushed with embarrassment. The baby made a small sound, something between a coo and a babble. I looked down at the stroller and saw him for the first time. 9 months old, with Marissa's dark curls and eyes that must have come from Derek's side. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. "He's lovely," I said, my voice catching despite my attempt to stay composed. Marissa nodded, tears forming in her eyes. We stood there in that hallway, silence heavy between us, a lifetime of hurt and love tangled together in the space between grandmother and grandchild. The baby suddenly looked up at me with those curious eyes, studying my face intently. Then, without warning, he pointed one tiny finger directly at me and said clearly, "Nana." The word pierced through everything, all the hurt, all the walls I'd built, all the careful distance I'd maintained. My grandson's first word to me. A word he shouldn't even know. I looked at Marissa in shock. Tears were streaming down her face now. "I've been showing him pictures," she whispered. "Teaching him your face. I didn't know if you'd ever want to meet him, but I couldn't let him grow up not knowing you existed." Derek shifted uncomfortably, looking at his phone again. But Marissa stepped closer, her voice breaking. "I've been so stupid, Mom. So incredibly stupid. I threw away everything that mattered for things that didn't. And I don't know how to fix it." I knelt down slowly, coming to eye level with the stroller. My grandson watched me with solemn curiosity. "What's his name?" I asked again, the same question I'd asked 9 months ago that had gone unanswered. "James," Marissa said softly. "After Dad." "I should have told you that first. I should have told you everything first. James." She'd named him after my husband, after the father she barely remembered. I reached out tentatively, and my grandson grabbed my finger with his tiny hand, holding tight. "Hi, James," I whispered. "I'm your Nana." He smiled, a big, gummy, beautiful smile. And despite everything, despite all the pain and rejection, my heart cracked open. Not breaking, but opening. Making room for something I'd thought was lost forever. Over the following weeks, Marissa and I began a slow, careful process of rebuilding. Not rushing, not pretending the past hadn't happened, but taking genuine steps forward. She came to my house once a week, bringing James. We didn't talk much at first, just sat together while James played with toys on my living room floor. Gradually, Marissa started being honest. About how Derek's obsession with status had poisoned her thinking. About how his parents had made her feel like she had to choose between their world and mine. About how scared she'd been of not fitting into their wealthy lifestyle. "I thought if I kept you separate, I could be who they wanted me to be," she admitted one afternoon. "I thought I had to erase where I came from to fit where I was going." "And now?" I asked. "Now I realize I erased the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. Derek's parents disappeared the moment we had financial problems. But you." She paused, crying. "You could have let me destroy myself. Instead, you held your ground." I'd made a decision weeks earlier, after that first meeting at the hospital. I called Mr. Langford. "I want to create a new educational trust fund," I told him. "For my grandson, James." "Are you sure, Evelyn?" "Yes. But with conditions. The fund can only be accessed when James turns 18. Not before. It's for his education, his future, independent of his parents' choices. Nobody can touch it but him when he's old enough to understand its value." The fund wasn't as large as the original, $50,000 instead of $250,000. But it was enough. Enough to give James opportunities without enabling the behavior that had driven us apart. When I told Marissa about it, she cried again. "You didn't have to do this." "I didn't do it for you," I said honestly. "I did it for him. Because he deserves a future, regardless of what happened between us." A year after that terrible day in the hospital, I found myself sitting in my living room with James on my lap, reading him a picture book. He was almost 2 now, talking more, laughing freely, calling me Nana without hesitation. Marissa sat across from us, watching with a soft smile. Derek had started showing up less to these visits, his discomfort with the situation evident. Their marriage was strained, probably wouldn't survive. But that was their journey to navigate. The doorbell rang. Marissa stood to answer it, returning with a small wrapped box. "What's this?" I asked. "Just open it." Inside was the yellow baby blanket I'd knitted before James was born. The one that had sat in my drawer, never delivered. It had been washed and carefully folded. "I found it in your bedroom during one of my visits," Marissa said quietly. "You left it out on your dresser. I took it home, and James has been sleeping with it every night for 3 months. It's his favorite thing." I looked down at my grandson, who had grabbed the blanket from the box and was clutching it against his cheek. "Nana," he said happily, pointing at the blanket, then at me. My eyes filled with tears. The blanket had found its way to him after all. "I know I can never fully make up for what I did," Marissa said. "Calling you nobody, keeping James from you, only reaching out when I needed money. I was cruel and selfish." "Yes, you were," I agreed. "No sugarcoating, no excuses." She nodded, accepting the truth. "But I'm learning. I'm changing. And I hope someday you can forgive me. Not for my sake, I don't deserve it. But maybe for his." She gestured to James. I looked at my grandson, then at my daughter. "I was once told I was nobody," I said slowly. "But I learned something important through all of this. Nobody can erase the love of a mother who finally loves herself first." I pulled James closer, kissing the top of his curly head. "I forgive you, Marissa. Not because you've earned it, but because holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means moving forward with clear boundaries and honest expectations." She nodded, crying softly. "I can live with that." Outside my window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. James babbled something incomprehensible, pointing at the colors. And in that moment, surrounded by the family I'd fought so hard to protect and the dignity I'd refused to sacrifice, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Complete. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. Not because all the hurt had disappeared, it hadn't. But because I'd learned the most important lesson of all, my worth wasn't determined by how others treated me. It was determined by how I treated myself. And I would never be nobody again.